the Halo has won the battle of driver cockpit protection. And I was going to say the Halo we know and love, the Halo we know and kind of love, I suppose. In your case, I know you're a bit of a fan, right?
I'm an advocate because of its safety things. There's no getting away from the fact that it is a compromise, and it isn't necessarily aesthetically as pleasing as the Shield or the Aero screen. But it's there to do a job. It's there to save drivers' lives and their head and necks from injury. So, let's live with it, at least for a few years until the big change in regulations comes up.
Well, speaking of the word big, the big question is there anything the teams can do within, obviously, the FIA structure that they're going to be given?
Well, the teams have been given some freedom. Now, the Halo itself, the metal inner structure, will be made by a third party and supplied to the teams. The teams will then pin it to the chassis at the front and by the cockpit sides. But they will be allowed to add carbon fibre bodywork around it to streamline it. And in theory, you could play about with the shapes a little bit to help the aero of the car, but it's not going to be like it's suddenly going to have big veins and wings sticking out of it. You've only got about a 30mm allowance around the diameter of the tubing in which to add this fairing. So it's probably just going to be quite subtle streamline, a bit like you see on wishbones, rather than it being like a new version of the T-Wing for 2018.
And just to remind the viewers, the car we're seeing there, of course, next year, when they do race with the Halo, it won't have the shark's fin on it.
No, so for next year, the shark fin and the T-Wing will both be gone, and the Halo will be there. Now, the teams can play with the colour of the Halo with carbon fibre here, but if we switch over, we can see the car, and the teams can add liveries to it. They can add their own colour, sponsor stickers, and have it, and that will actually make it blend away much better than a pure carbon fibre version as we've seen so
Well, it
far.
looks a lot better with the livery colour. One of the things that a lot of the fans have been saying is, will it in any way obstruct forward vision? And you would think, looking at it, that it does, but I've got a story to tell there, and that was driving with Jody Scheckter in the rain at Silverstone many years ago now, at a Goodyear test day. I was in a road car with him, it was raining. We were in a very hot Renault, a quick car, and he drove out of the pits, the wipers weren't on, and we went through Maggots and Beckett's and down towards Stowe, and still the wipers weren't on. And I was sort of looking at him, wondering if there was a problem with the wipers. And I said, Jody, you're going to put the wipers on? He said, oh, yeah, maybe. And just flicked them on. And then it occurred to me, of course, that people with very good vision, and particularly racing drivers, are looking so far ahead that raindrops on the windscreen actually mean nothing to them at all. So that is no obstruction at all. They're looking 150 metres ahead all the time. Of course, it's a slightly different issue on the grid, particularly if you're looking up at the lights, I guess, there's an issue there. But then we should also remember that they're quite good at putting tape over a lot of the top of the visors as well, so they don't actually want a lot of vision anyway high up.
And again, most people's view is that front pillar would be quite distracting, but the driver, as you say, is looking at apexes, and on the straight, they're not really looking straight ahead. When you're on a straight,
they're looking so far ahead. It's not as if, even if they're looking straight ahead, and they're looking miles ahead.
Just as you have pillars in your car, your eyes and your brain overcome that obstacle. So I don't think that's going to be a bigger issue. The FIA know that the start lights could be an issue, and that's been understood from when we first saw the prototype of this come out back at the beginning of last year during testing. So I think all of that will be worked out. Some of the drivers don't like it. Some of the drivers are obviously very vocal about that they don't like the idea of this. But equally...
But they weren't at Monza in '78 when Vittorio Brambilla was nearly killed by a front wheel going back into the cockpit. And ever since then, I've been saying we should have forward brace roll bars. And I think that is a much more aesthetic forward brace roll bar than we could ever have imagined back in 1978. So full marks to the people who've come up with that. Doesn't look great, but that's got to be better than having the risk of a wheel coming up or something else. Well, not a wheel so much these days because of the good job they've done, but other debris we know. And of course, what happens when the car goes upside down? Have we seen a simulation of that?
The FIA had a press conference in Hungary and were explaining the situations which the car or the Halo works. And one of the situations is, what if the car rolls over? And they did a test of this. And I think most people would think that if the car rolls upside down, that it would rest almost perfectly horizontally on top of the thing. But because of the roll structure and the fact that the car would be broken and unbalanced, it generally tips to one side. And they showed that the driver can still climb out, much like Alonso did in his Melbourne crash a couple of years ago, just crawl out through the top of this. Now, the cockpit exit time has been increased. At the moment, for the driver to get out of the car with seatbelts on, steering wheel, it's 5 seconds minimum. You've got to be out. They've increased this to maybe 8, maybe as much as 10. And a lot of people are thinking, well, if the driver takes longer to get out of the cockpit, is that not less safe? What if there is a fire? But the driver has physically further to get out. He has got a structure to get past. But what we're finding now is that there isn't the danger of fire that there used to be. The biggest issue would be head and neck injuries are the most likely scenario for a driver to be injured in any sort of crash. So this is what that's aimed at, and as far as we can see, that there shouldn't be any issue with the drivers getting out of the car, except perhaps they're in the garages, because they do have the gantries over them, and the teams will have to redesign them so the driver can actually get out without banging their head if they get in.
What about getting in, as a matter of fact? Have we seen a driver getting into this yet?
I watched this whenever they were testing the Halo last year. I went down and watched the cockpit exit times, watched the drivers getting in and out. And it's a bigger step up and in, there's no question of it. And getting out, you have your first sort of elbows on the side of the chassis, then they get up and then put their elbows on the halo and climb out. And although they have restricted headroom within the cockpit, because I said of the gantries, all of the lighting and the electrics above them, that will be changed by the teams. It's not that difficult, because it's a very large, if you could look overhead, there's a very large area in which you can climb in through this. And with the cockpit padding and everything else, that's already quite difficult to get into a Formula One car.